Department. I'd like to welcome you to our museum today. I have a few words before we actually get into the service. We all know how long Vietnam lasted. It seemed to go on forever. And at that time, the people of this country seem to forget who runs wars. Right? Common, ordinary people, they don't go to war. It's the politicians above them who make us do that. In previous wars, particularly World War II, everybody was behind the effort. By the time Vietnam started, of course, that had gone 180 degrees. And sad to say, the people of this country forgot how to separate the war from the warrior. So when our veterans came home, the majority of them, I like to think, came home and they had a pretty decent welcome home. But there was a number of them, particularly those coming through Seattle, San Francisco, Oakland. You know, they were told, don't wear your uniform outside the gates. And we've all heard a multitude of stories of veterans or combat returnees being spat on, called every kind of name you can imagine. Around 1985, 10 years after the official end of the war, the perception started to change. In 1985, there was a big welcome home to do in Washington, D.C. That was the start of making amends for the way we had treated those veterans when they came home. When we went to fight Desert Storm, thanks to our Vietnam veterans, when we came home, well, when I say we, you guys got the parades, we're getting parades. I was still sitting out in the desert. So others got to come home. They had a ticker tape parade. You didn't have people outside the airport, you know, yelling at them and cussing and calling them all sorts of names. And having talked to a number of Desert Storm veterans, we universally agree that our welcome home was a true welcome home because the Vietnam vets had made it clear they weren't going to let what happened to them happen to us. So when we have these ceremonies, you know, we did one a couple years ago, and at the VA we had 250 people there. We did another ceremony during one of our festivals out there. We had 2 veterans show up. And that's fine. I don't care if we have 1 person or 100 people. As long as we get to give our thanks to 1 veteran, we've done our job. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox now. We'll begin with our ceremony. If you're able, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. In this particular flag, not on a flagpole obviously, I feel a certain attachment to that flag because everybody's heard of Goodwill Easter seals, right? Okay. That's where that flag came from. And there was a note inside that said U.S. flag $29. Apparently it had been in a yard sale. But written on the fly of the flag, or the halyard side, was a name and a date for a specialist for Stephen Williams. He was every bit of 19 years old when he got to Vietnam. 2 months later, he was dead. And that was his family's only son. And this is all that's left of his story. So I feel, I don't know how to describe it, I just feel attached to it. So we'll use Stephen's flag for our Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able, if you could please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we have a notification by Colonel Chaplain Kim Bowen, the 88th Air Base Wing Chaplain. Sir.
Please join me in prayer today. God, our eternal Father in heaven, We come before thee this day in humility as we thank thee for the undeniable blessings we enjoy as Americans, to live in a sovereign land designed by thy supreme sovereignty and perfect knowledge. Father, today we invoke thy blessing upon this gathering as we come together for the express purpose of recognizing those who at a certain time in our history responded to their nation's call, traveled to foreign lands, to Vietnam, to Laos, to Cambodia, as they served their country with honor and distinction. Leaving the comforts of hearth and home, they donned a uniform that represented a long history of patriots, willing to lay down their very lives if necessary, that others might enjoy the freedoms and rights of self-governance. God, how blessed we are for their service and for the sacrifices of their families. And for those families, Father, that never did have the joy of welcoming home their sons and daughters, our hearts are most full of appreciation for them. It is for these sacrifices and rendered service that we ask thy blessing upon this ceremony today. Father, be with us now, and may this time of remembrance honor these warriors and families as we ask that thy hand be placed upon each of them in divine acknowledgement of their honorable service. This is our prayer as we offer it in his holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Padre. Your next speaker has quite a distinguished career. In your program, you'll learn a little bit about Colonel Meyer. And as you read that, that's the abbreviated version. So Laurel has been to a lot of places and he's done a lot of things, both in his military life and afterwards. So we're quite thankful not only to have him as a speaker, but also as one of our volunteers here. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Laurel.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
No problem. Let me get my dune buggy out of the way.
And appreciate you that came. Kathy told me I could wear a uniform, so I wore my appropriate uniform over here for today's ceremony. And I want to say we are grateful. I certainly am. We should be for the Military Veterans Museum coming to Miami Valley and to Fairborn, because they live here. It could have gone elsewhere. And we're thankful to Kathy and Mark for making it work, building upon it, including establishing events that we're doing today. And I'm not sure if, I know I got this one over at the Senior Center, but I think you guys were involved in setting that up, the Military Service Medal. I took some notes here, but I'm going to keep it short. I promise to keep it 10 minutes or less. Now, show of hands, I'm looking at the audience here. Most of you served somewhere between 1955 and 75. Raise your hand, please. Or were a spouse, or served otherwise, or have family members. So you're all part of the group. You know, we often say justifiably that the World War II generation, our fathers and grandfathers in some cases, were the greatest generation. But there were a heck of a lot of great people in the next couple of decades, as Mark said, served in Vietnam, but also in Korea, the Cold War. And so if you served after 95, you still count. Doesn't matter when you served. And serving may not be put on the uniform, you served in other ways. Maybe you went to the volunteered USO, maybe you just supported a family neighbor who needed help when the spouse was overseas. Those are all worthy adventures. But they're the greatest generation, as I said, but there's a heck of a lot of great people in the next couple of decades who served in all those places. And we got to give thanks to those. As Mark said, sometimes it was overlooked. Unfortunately, I came to the West Coast last time in 70, and I wasn't harassed, but I was ignored, which is fine at the time. My family didn't ignore me. They were happy to see me home. I was happy to go home. And the uniform, I can't remember. I do know, I came home on a camera, and I knew there was a place to take our uniforms off and throw them in a bin, and they were gonna take the ranks off and give them to the people in the local communities who needed fatigues, or they were all fatigued. Not the fancy. I looked for, I don't have any of my Vietnam stuff. I still have some Korea stuff, that's another story. I wasn't into combat in Korea, but I did serve over there during the team spirit exercises. Now, having said all that, I promise to keep it short. A little bit about Vietnam. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about myself, necessarily what I did. A couple of little tidbits. Kathy was kind enough to invite me back on June 7th. So you're going to get bored for an hour hearing about Laurel experience during the Vietnam era. You come and listen to me, and I'll be happy to share with you. And if you want to join me and tell me if you had experiences over there. Having said that, Vietnam goes down as not a great military victory. But you can also argue that, I would argue, that in our effort to stop the communist spread around the world, we didn't win, unquote, but part of the problem was the North Vietnamese, maybe whether they're true Marxists or not, it's questionable. They had a national movement of their people that the South, I don't know if we took it away from it, didn't have it. I wasn't a big fan of the Diem family, if you know about them. They were kind of the royal family of South Vietnam. They were theoretically democratically elected. A few years later, in the mid-60s, the military took over a couple of coups. That didn't help the people of Vietnam feel that they really had a national movement. And then the Vietnamization apparently was not looked at, all the Vietnamese, as their war, and there's a proper reason for it. Now, having said that, there's a great monument over in the Air Force. By the way, Air Force Museum gets all the publicity. We need more here. Anybody ever go out in that? I call it Monument Park. It's a beautiful. To me, it's more interesting, rewarding than inside the museum. Inside the museum is great, but different wings and squadrons and people built benches, monuments. I saw a couple of Milo outfits, but there's one great one, and it's put there by one of the SAC wings, and it said the Cold War didn't just end, it was won. Think about it, the Cold War didn't just end, it was won. The good news is the Vietnamese, they've still got a communist government, but they're not under the thumb of China. In fact, they're arguing with China over the Spratly Islands and other things. The Vietnamese have their own national culture, and I think I had a couple of students who were Vietnamese refugees. Now they worked with us during the war. They went to re-education camps. They said on Saigon, maybe I wanted to hear that, but they said that my friends call it Saigon. They don't call it Ho Chi Minh City. It's Saigon as far as they're concerned, and they still have great love and respect for the Americans who sacrificed 58,000 in that, monument, plus probably another million that served over there in the theater. It was on a ship off the coast over in Thailand. We have people in Laos, and there's a lot of. I had a good friend who spent a whole year over there undercover. A lot of that went on. So we owe a lot to our generation, And Vietnam is still, it's just as a country, it's got its own independent regime. Even though they're communists, I don't think they're real Marxists. I think they love capitalism and trading. And I think one of the big tennis shoes companies building them all over there. I think a lot of other things going on over there. I think so. It wasn't a total loss. And as part of the greater Cold War win, it was a component. It was a component. So that's all good, and we can be proud of that part of it. Unless there's some questions, it's all. Now, as I said, I promise to keep it to 10 minutes. I don't know if I went over or not. I apologize. Instructing at college is another little tidbit. When I was in Vietnam in 1969, we had an education officer. She came and said, "Hey, Laurel, you got a graduate degree. Will you teach a Maryland course at night?" So I took my first college course, ironically, in 1969 in Vietnam. And the people, who took the course, they'd get their money back. We had nothing. There were no computers. Didn't have an overhead projector. Sat around the table and talked. We read the book together. So it really wasn't. But anyway, so that's another thing to remind us of the good things that were happening and things that I enjoyed doing. So I'm going to end it right there, unless someone wants to make a comment or question. And I think you're going to take over, Kathy, or Mark, or both of you.
No, I think that's me.
Yes, you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
You want me to hand out these things?
Oh, yeah, we're gonna do that in a little bit.
Oh, not now, okay.
Yeah, not now. Okay. So, I get to tell the purpose of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. I'm not gonna tell the official thing, but it's, for me, this is something that I get to be part of that is bigger than me, and always will be. Our Vietnam vets, as Laurel said, and Mark did, were ignored, thrown by the wayside. When there were so many of them who went because they wanted to keep communism at bay. So many of them were drafted and killed. My father was killed in action, and on his second voluntary, and that makes this so much more important to me, to be able to think of it and welcome them home. I carry lapel pins on me because there are a lot of Vietnam vets walking around who they have their ball caps or a jacket, and sometimes it's really hard for me, but it's not as hard for me as it is for the guys and gals, and I am grateful to them. I am, if I can say, grateful to the DoD for recognizing our Vietnam vets. Read a quote, something President Obama had said. And one of the most painful chapters in our history was Vietnam, most particularly how we treated our troops. You were often blamed for a war you didn't start, and when you should have been commended for serving your country with valor. It's shame on the government, shame on everybody who couldn't separate the government from the people. Okay. Chaplain.
I hope you don't care that I take a little liberty and share with you my own personal experience. I was a child of the 60s. I grew up, I was a young boy at the time. And I will never forget the images that came across the television as reporters by the likes of Dan Rather and Roger Mudd reported from the field. And the killed in action numbers that would come across the screen each night on the nightly news. That made a profound impression upon my mind. We're often drawn oddly to the things that we fear. And for me as a boy, I feared that I would grow up and a lot like those around me who were older would be drafted into that horrific, hellish experience. And yet I was always impressed and keenly affirmed by those that were in uniform who would go and do that for those who could not do it for themselves. You were my heroes. You were my heroes. And although I was fearful that I'd ever have to wear a uniform in the future, it's interesting that's where the good Lord drew me to. Speed forward. Now it's 2010, and I'm at Fort Benning going through a graduate program there. Compliments of the Air Force once again. And out on the parade field behind the National Infantry Museum, there was a ceremony that I will never forget in like manner. And it was for the troops that had never been welcomed home properly. And they had a formation of Vietnam vets, no kidding, in formation, and a formation of current military men and women. And there was a speaker, one who had served in Vietnam, a general officer, very old at the time, obviously. But what I witnessed after that whole ceremony was what was most profound for me. When the troops were welcomed home from the pulpit and asked for them to come forward, and formations were broken, and people from the stands all converged on this field and welcomed home those Vietnam vets. Not a dry eye in the stadium. So today I find it very meaningful for me to be able to officially, for this posture, thank you for what you did. Profoundly grateful. Commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War by President of the United States of America, a proclamation. As we observe the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, we reflect with solemn reverence upon the valor of a generation that served with honor. We pay tribute to the more than 3 million servicemen and women who left their families to serve bravely, a world away from everything they knew and everyone they loved. From Yang Drang to Khe Sanh, from Hue to Saigon, and countless villages in between. They pushed through jungles and rice paddies, heat and monsoon, fighting heroically to protect the ideals we hold dear as Americans. Through more than a decade of combat over air, land, and sea, these proud Americans upheld the highest traditions of our armed forces. As a grateful nation, we honor more than 58,000 patriots, their names etched in black granite, who sacrificed all they had and all they would ever know. We draw inspiration from the heroes who suffered unspeakably as prisoners of war, yet who returned home with their heads held high. We pledge to keep with faith with those who were wounded and still carried the scars of war, seen and unseen. With more than 1,600 of our service members still among the missing, we pledge as a nation to do everything in our power to bring these patriots home. In the reflection of the wall, we see the military family members and veterans who carry a pain that may never fade. May they find peace in knowing their loved ones endure, not only in medals and memories, but in the hearts of all Americans, who are forever grateful for their service, valor, and sacrifice. In recognition of a chapter in our nation's history that must never be forgotten, let us renew our sacred commitment to those who answered our country's call in Vietnam and those who awaited their safe return. Beginning on Memorial Day 2012, the federal government will partner with local governments, private organizations, and communities across America to participate in the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, a 13-year program to honor and give thanks to a generation of proud Americans who saw our country through one of the most difficult, challenging missions we have ever faced. While no words will ever be fully worthy of their service, nor any honor truly befitting their sacrifice, let us remember that it is never too late to pay tribute to men and women who answered the call of duty with courage and valor. Let us renew our commitment to the fullest possible accounting for those who have not returned. Throughout this commemoration, let us strive to live up to their example by showing our Vietnam veterans, their families, and all who have served the fullest respect and support of a grateful nation. Now, therefore, I, Barack Obama, President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim May 28, 2012 through November 11, 2025 as the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. I call upon federal, state, and local officials to honor our Vietnam veterans, our fallen, our wounded, those unaccounted for, our former prisoners of war, their families, and all who served with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 25th day of May in the year of our Lord 2012, and the independence of the United States of America, the 236th, signed Barack Obama.
You'll stay up here. So we're gonna do, we have lapel pins for our Vietnam veterans. And spouses. What I would like to do is, and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Yeah, there's not many of this. So if you served anywhere in the world, 1955, 1975, there's a lapel pin for you. If you are the spouse of, the widow, or child of, we have pins for you. And if you have somebody that you would like to give a pin to, tell me, we'll give you your pins. So after I do this, Laurel, you want to, yeah. You okay with this?
Yeah.
Okay. So Laurel will give each of you a proclamation, which is what Bowen read, and then the second, the other pages, the other page of it is, we need to go around here, is, yes, if you want to stand over there,
Okay.
and you can stand here and welcome home each veteran that comes up. All right.
Can I make a small comment, Kathy?
Absolutely.
I overheard someone talking about 1941 to, who was that? Somebody in the service in 41? Or we were alive in 41, yeah. Some of us that were born in the 30s.
55 is when I entered the service.
Okay, well, you were an early bird, yeah. Not the kind you top this, but I put on my first Air Force unit in 54 as a cadet, 1954, so I beat you by a year, maybe. Because you were really on active duty, I wasn't.
But I was between Korea and Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
Too young for Korea and too old for Vietnam.
Well, you served, that's what's important, yes.
But I served, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Vietnam veterans, come on down.
Vietnam or other veterans.
So this is spouse. This is the cadet.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't get a stick from that.
I think it was stuff
We
there.
start here.
I'm the action.
Ma'am, thank you for your sacrifice.
Gotta go this way.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
gotta
gotta
go
go.
around.
I never want to presume.
Yeah.
Served or supported?
Supported.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Sir, welcome.
I'm gonna miss this.
Thank you.
And by the way, this museum can always use volunteers, and including checkbooks as well as time. David served in Vietnam and in the Middle East too, I guess.
Oh, my. Talk about the Cold War being over.
Oh, no, it's, it will never be over. Yeah.
We won the big one though, we're gonna give us credit for winning the big one.
Ma'am, serve your support.
Thank you so much.
Submarine service, God bless you.
Thank you.
Do you know about,
What an honor.
John Spencer, young airborne boy, made admiral as part of the submarine service?
My dad
Became a
served.
submarine
Yes, he
commander,
did.
the Legion commander,
Boy, we're shaking.
right here from Fairmont, Lower High School graduate.
No, I'm not originally from around here.
Okay,
I moved here about 10 years ago.
okay. I never did like submarines. You had to share your bunk with somebody.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because only so many places, somebody had to be on duty.
Well, it's never cold that way. You ever have to get into a
Warm
cold
body.
bed.
I won't talk about today with the gals on the submarines. I don't think, have they done that yet? I think they have.
We got them on there now.
I would vote against that. I'm an old fashioned guy. Thank you, man. Take that out.
Thank you.
Another Navy guy, yes.
What we were talking about in 1941.
Oh,
Those are, yeah, and they, send you a certificate.
I remember a while that day,
I wish that
my mother had me shopping and what you
gold star.
talk about a downer. I was in the 45 and people were throwing things out the window. Celebration. Thank you, sir. Thank you. What ship did you serve on? Destroyer?
No, it was
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
You had to go up on the beach?
No, we carried an apple.
Okay,
That's all.
so you're well protected.
Oh, it was right with that Marine Corps.
Oh, yeah.
That's
God bless the Marines.
Yeah.
There was, when they did the study on Vietnam, the think tank guys out of the Rand Center, they're bright guys out there. But they came up with an idea. I think that the Marines were a waste of time. We got a Navy, we got an Army. What the hell did we need Marines for? And God, what was a really smart guy? He said, you know, if you did qualitative analysis, you agree that, but when something happens to the world, what do we do? Call the Marines, let's not get rid of them. So we did. So, did you get one?
Oh, thank you.
For his wife.
Yeah. My wife, my father-in-law served during that time as well, so, but we've taken care of
I'm gonna
him.
take one of those.
Do you have anything you want to say before we?
Well, God bless you, every one of you, and thanks for showing up today.
Your service,
May his hand be upon you through your lives, and may you feel the divine blessings of one who appreciates those who maintain the sovereignty of this great nation and the cause of it. May you go forth and be blessed.
We have done this is our 5th year. And Mark started with the program when it first came out. We have done presentations for 5 years. We've done the big ones, like Mark says, and the little ones. And it doesn't matter. As long as Vietnam vets, we can say, I didn't forget you. And I welcome you home. Then life is good. All right, thank you all for coming.
I'm going to share a story with
Oh,
you.
one last set
There's
of comments.
Okay,
1961. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are refreshments on the far table. There are things that the DOD gives us for our Vietnam vets.
Again, I want to thank everybody for coming, but I especially want to thank Kathy. I know she doesn't like it when people sing her praises, but I like to do it because I get to be her husband. And over the years, she's probably formally presented or tracked down veterans totaling over 2,500 of these lapel pins. So she's done more than her fair share of honoring those people. And obviously, being a Gold Star daughter, she has a vested interest in it. But I think that's quite an achievement to be a part of a program that we're only required to do one event per year to maintain our status with the DoD. We've been a partner with them for 9 years, so we had to do 9 events. This is somewhere in the 80th for us. But that's by and large thankful to Kathy, so why not show her a little bit of appreciation with some applause. I know, I'll pay for it later.
We were in the Fairfield Mall one day. I saw a guy going that way. I was going this way. I turned around and ran after him. I said, I want to give you your little help in. And I interrupted dinners. Yeah, it's like, I don't care where I see you. You're going to get it. Yeah, you're going to get yours. Thank you all for coming. You'll get yours. All right.
Thank
We are.